I can't just pick up someone else's gifts and try to use it for myself because it won't work that way. I am a poet and I'm a writer, and that's my form of trying to infuse some sort of healing in the world. And I have to be honest about that if I'm going to do the work well, and show up well. And that's what I hope people get from my book and my work is it is about that softness of showing up to ourselves and learning who we are so we can show up in the world.
In a world heavy with heartbreak and injustice, I've been searching for ways to stay grounded in my humanity, ways to resist not only despair, but also the systems of harm and oppression around us. My guest today, Kaitlin Curtice, calls this practice living resistance. Kaitlin is an award-winning author, poet, who writes and speaks at the intersections of spirituality, identity, and collective healing. Through her work, including her book, Living Resistance, and her upcoming release, Everything is a Story, she invites us to become more fully ourselves, to honor the gifts we already hold, and to let those gifts ripple out in love, courage, and care for the world. Her life has been shaped by liminality, existing between her Native American heritage and a Southern Baptist Christian upbringing. And this in-between space has given her a unique lens on how we find belonging and move toward healing in a fractured world. In our conversation, Kaitlin shares how resistance is not a single act, but a continuous practice of becoming and being. She reflects on how it could be gentle and fierce, personal and political, and she offers practices for grounding ourselves in the midst of life's spiral journeys. We close with her resistance commitment, a poetic call to action that reminds us that living resistance means tending to our inner lives while courageously shaping our collective future. I'm so grateful to my friend and former guest, Rachel Macy Stafford, who first connected me to Kaitlin. Rachel's dedication to this episode captures what Kaitlin offers the world, a call to link the best parts of ourselves so we can move forward together. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest.
Hello, I'm Rachel Macy Stafford, New York Times bestselling author of 5 books and certified special education teacher. Today, I'm honored to dedicate this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast to Kaitlin Curtice. The first time I met Kaitlin, we were in a crowded room, both of us there to audition for a live storytelling event in a big city that was new to both of us. When Kaitlin introduced herself, she said she was a mom of 2 young boys, an enrolled member of the Potawatomi Nation, an author, a singer-songwriter, and an avid coffee drinker. Kaitlin had barely returned to her seat when I leaned over and whispered, "Hi, do you give guitar lessons? I'd love for you and my daughter to meet." Kaitlin admitted she was self-taught, yet she was willing to give it a try. 2 weeks later, Kaitlin and my daughter Avery sat together in a little blue room at the front of my house playing guitar while I wept in the kitchen. Their voices blended so beautifully, but it was more than musical harmony. It was a harmony of spirit. Each Sunday afternoon, the pair cultivated music, laughter, and something even greater, hope for the world. What Kaitlin and Avery created with each other and because of each other was something profoundly good, and it was carried out into the world after they parted ways. What Kaitlin did for Avery is what she does for the world. In every essay she writes, in every book she publishes, in every speech Kaitlin gives, is a call to link the best parts of ourselves so we can move forward together. Those Sunday lessons became the start of a very special friendship between us, one that has endured time and distance and become a real source of strength in the difficult world of publishing. Offering us a way forward is the work of Kaitlin Curtice, author, poet, and speaker. Through her books, essays, and poems, she leads with honesty and vulnerability, reminding us that the work of healing, justice, and transformation belongs to all of us for the good of all of us. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Kaitlin, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. I have been so excited to have you here today. And where I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, it is this gorgeous, sunny, beautiful day where the flowers are blooming. I took my dog for a walk this morning and I found myself just slowing down and being more present and paying attention to everything, which is a gift that your work and the book that I've been diving into, I know you have several books, but I've been living Resistance. Those were all gifts that you already gave me before we even started talking.
I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you.
So we're going to start with a question I ask every guest. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and the impact that your own mother has had in shaping who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family with 3 kids, and I'm the baby by many years. So my siblings are 7 and 9 years older than me, and I grew up moving a lot as a kid, grew up in a really impoverished setting in a lot of ways. And, my mom was a single mom for a while after my parents got divorced. And so I know how hard she worked to take care of us, and to provide for us. And I was thinking about this notebook that my mom has had for a long time. It's a journal with quotes and poetry written in it, because she has words. And so she would write down just quotes that she loved and keep them in this journal and poetry. And I started doing that when I was in my 20s. So I think about that sometimes, that just gift of words that, when we go through hard things in life, we need words to hold on to. And I've always done that too. And I really appreciated that she had that, and so I was thinking about that little thing that's such a beautiful gift. Like I have one that's this little like teal journal with pink polka dots on it because I got it in my, mid-20s and started filling it out. And it just has quotes from so many different times in my life, and that's such a gift to have that today as I'm getting older.
I love that thread and that gift that your mom gave you. And you had a really interesting upbringing too, in terms of navigating and walking 2 different cultures and religions. How do you think that has brought you to what you're most on a quest for today?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to for me is liminality, this idea of existing in the complex spaces of ourselves and the world. Because being Indigenous, Native American, and growing up within conservative Southern Baptist Christianity, but also trying to figure out identity and culture and community and all of those things and moving a lot. I have just lived in liminality for a long time, and I actually really see that as a gift. So it can be difficult to be someone who exists in many spaces, right? Because it makes the questions even deeper, I think, as we get older, of who we are and who we want to be in the world. But there comes this really beautiful sweetness to it as well, as we slowly kind of unravel and find those gifts along the way of who we are and come to be okay with who we are in all of the complexity. I think that that's really wonderful. And it's why I started the Liminality Journal, my Substack, and why I write my books too. I just want to hold space for others who are asking those kinds of questions of belonging and identity and healing and how we sort of show up for ourselves in all of those complex ways.
I love all of that so much. And one of the things that I think I feel so drawn to about your story and your journey and your ongoing work is this idea that we are constantly becoming who we are. You talk about the fact that our journey is not in a straight line. And I'm always thinking about how we grow in a spiral. One of the youth development organizations that really shaped who I am, I worked for over 15 years, and the logo was a spiral. And it was this reminder that we often come back to maybe a challenge or a hard lesson or something that feels like we wish we had moved past this already. And we can notice that we're not necessarily going backwards, but we are revisiting something, but in our current selves with all the knowledge, all the lessons, and all the experiences that we have now. And I think there's just something so powerful about the way that you talk about that throughout the whole book. And I feel like as we are dealing with the current administration, which in some ways feels like a backwards moment, we're all different than we were the first time around. And so I've been really trying to figure out, what have I learned all these years? Who have I been becoming? that I wasn't the first time that we were dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, one of the first interviews I did when I launched the Mother's Quest podcast in 2016 was with Paula Mendoza, who was one of the organizers of the Women's March. And, she talked about resistance. And I remember at that time feeling like resistance wasn't a word I had ever imagined I could identify with.
Mm.
And what would it look like if I stepped into that? What was it like for me to start to go to protests and to start to find an activist voice inside myself?
Mm-hmm.
And it felt very foreign. And I still think I'm grappling with it. But there's this way that you talk about resistance that feels like not this thing we do in the moment by showing up to something or calling ourselves a new name, but it is an ongoing process that shows up in the smallest and the biggest ways. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about how we live resistance from you during this time.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it, is that it is not this sort of thing that rises up in the moment, but it's that like trickle, of learning and understanding. And, we can't really resist the status quo of hate or oppression or whatever it is, that toxic status quo that harms us as a whole or as individuals. We can't really get there if we don't understand ourselves. So there's no point in us trying to each show up and resist in the ways that don't work for who we are, that we all have specific ways to show up in the world. And that doesn't mean that we don't push our own boundaries and learn to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we should absolutely do that. But it does mean that I can't just pick up someone else's gifts and try to use it for myself, because it won't work that way. I am a poet and I'm a writer, and that's my form of trying to infuse some sort of healing in the world. And I have to be honest about that if I'm going to do the work well, and show up well. And that's what I hope people get from my book and my work, is it is about that softness of showing up to ourselves and learning who we are so we can show up in the world.
I'm wondering, before we dive into what they call the epic guideposts, living an epic life has become the thing that I strive for and I talk about with all of my guests on the podcast. There's both these guideposts that are the things that I think help us live our life when we're raising our kids. It's an acronym mnemonic, but there's also the larger frame about stepping back into being the author of our own story and living what feels epic to us, based exactly, as you're saying, on who we are. What do you feel like you are ultimately on a quest for now? And I'm curious about, the Kaitlin on this ring of the spiral in terms of how you've evolved through so many of the challenges that we've had, at least since 2016.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My first book came out in 2017, and I started writing for Sojourners, which is an online publication, focused on a lot of justice issues. And I started writing for them like in 2016 or 2017. So there was so much happening in me during that time too. It's been an interesting thing, like thinking about, 9 years from that time, like who am I now and what has my journey been? And I think something that has just been, I'm deeply learning that what I want to be in the world is a healer, and through words and through presence. And, sometimes, at least in the US, we really want artists, writers, poets. We want those people, but I think we also sort of demand that they show up in a certain way, and again, it's that like liminal space of trusting myself to show up with my gifts of words and writing, and especially poetry, in a time where I know people need it, but sometimes I feel like, is that enough? Like, is it enough to be a poet? And I went to Northern Ireland last fall, and there, poets are incredibly important. They're a huge part of political realities and social realities. And, poets are so admired in so many parts of the world for the gifts they give to society. And I came home with that reminder to myself that my poetry does matter on a political level. It matters on a societal level, a social level, especially a spiritual level, that poetry is an amazing tool, that words are an incredible tool, and that in like the darkest times of the world, we really, really need words. We need poets and painters and, other artists and creative and musicians, and we need the filmmakers. Like, we need creative arts to keep us grounded, to help us imagine a better future, to help us fight for that future. And so I'm trying to really ground myself in that I want to be, and I think I am, and I'm continuing to move toward, kind of claiming myself as a healer in that way, using words to help heal, not even to heal people directly, but even to help them find their own path of healing. My books are not a copy and paste guide. I often leave a lot of things open-ended for people because the whole point is that people just open themselves up to the journey and then they figure out who they are, and who they need to be along the way. Because we don't all have the exact same path. It's going to look different for all of us, but I want my words, my poetry, my work to sort of tether and ground people as they go on the journey, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And as I'm taking this in about you coming into understanding and owning the gift that you have and yourself better, and inviting those of us who are reading your work and learning it to do that too, I do think there's such a commonality between that and how we raise our kids in terms of wanting to model for them being ourselves so that we can help them become more fully themselves and discover what their unique gifts are. So I want to move into the first epic guidepost, E, which is about engage mindfully with our kids. And I'd love to hear, how does this way of being that you're describing and that you've been discovering show up in how you mother?
Yeah, so my kids are preteen and teenagers now. So we're in a really fun era of life with them. And, I had my kids young. I was 23, I think, when I had my first, and 25 when I had my second. So I had kids pretty young, and there was a lot I was learning along the way, And I think the one thing that my partner Travis and I both did have with them was just presence and trying to just lean into parenting and leaning into motherhood and just enjoying it, enjoying those very simple moments, becoming childlike alongside them. And now, as they're getting older, I have to reminding myself, okay, this is the time to be present, put the phone away or put your thoughts away for now. They'll be there later, but just be present to this moment with them. Be present to, making dinner together, or present to the trip that you're on, or climbing together. We rock climb a lot as a family. Whatever it is, that level of presence is, if you're present, we might notice, one of them is a little off today. What's going on? Let's talk about it. I have this red chair in my office that my youngest used to come and sit with me in the red chair. Anytime you had something you needed to talk about, I'd be like, do you want to go to the red chair? And we would go sit in the red chair and things like that. I want to be a safe place for them always, to be able to show up as they are, and for me to show up and be present.
That's so powerful. And what are you noticing about who they're becoming and the impact that your example may have had on them?
I grew up in a lot of trauma, and I hope that they get to see the reality of healthier relationships and how to care for themselves. I want them to have the toolkit of, this is how to set boundaries. This is how to say what I need. This is how to be in a loving argument. This is how to apologize. This is how to show up for other people, how to read a room or read a situation. There are those things that I want them as they get older, how to treat their friends well, how to treat others well. As they get older, I want them to sort of have that toolkit in place so that if they ever need it, they can look back and remember that we provided that for them. I think that that's something I hope for.
The next guidepost, P, stands for passionate and purposeful. And this is about the impact that you are uniquely here to make. How did you discover, how to claim what is your unique contribution? You were sharing even the trip to Ireland has strengthened your awareness. But what words of wisdom do you have for all of us about how we can tap into our ability to make an impact?
I did a talk recently with middle schoolers, and I was telling them, to find the thing that they love in the world and don't let go of that thing. and that thing that they love doesn't have to be their job as they get older, but to make sure that whatever that thing is that they love, that they don't let go of it, that it remains a part of their life somehow, and for me, that thing is words, and it happened to become my job, but it can be tricky like that. Sometimes the thing that we love, our part of our purpose, is not connected to the thing we do to make money in life. It may be a completely different thing that gives us a lot of purpose, or it is our job, and different people have different journeys with that. And so I always talk to like middle school and high schoolers about that because, as you're going off to college, as you're trying to find your way in the world, that can be really confusing. But when we stop and just think like, what is something that has always been there for me that I've always needed? I have always needed words, like always. I've always needed journals and poetry and fun pens to write with. Like I've always had that in me. When I was little, I would write poetry, just journaling. And then as a teenager, I started writing music, and I was a singer-songwriter for a while. And I still write music, but it shifted to my books. And I started a blog when my first son was born. And it's just words have come with me, in every season of my life and shown up. And so that's been my constant. I know that words are part of who I am and what I want to give to others. And so it all made sense to me when I became an author. I slowly started understanding like, oh, I literally can't live without words. I can't live without a way to express myself and to understand and process the world through words. And so even my newest book that comes out in October, it's called Everything is a Story. And it was just this little bubble, this like incubator where I was going to process the things happening in the world. And I would go to write this book. And that was where it was such a safe place for me to show up and lean into questions and grief and poetry and joy, and felt like community with all these other authors I was reading and all these people and other forms of art I'm interacting with. That all just falls into my books. And I love that process. It's like such a gift to me. And I don't know where I would be without words. So even if it wasn't my job, even if I had some other job, but I still needed words, I would find a way to have them in my life. And I think that that is like the sign of something that we shouldn't let go of if we need it that deeply.
What a great question. What has always been there for me? It's powerful to look back on our past and think about like those experiences from our childhood that like leave an imprint on us where we feel like it's like calling us to become more of who we are. Like, oh, this is it. This is really who I love. This is really who I am. And I want to say, like, just holding your book, it feels like it has energy to it. Like, I think there's something about the intentionality that you bring, as you were also talking about your new book, Everything is a Story. Like, it's not just words on a page. It's like the framework and the vision that you're holding for what you want the reader to experience. It's the artwork that's on the cover. I'm really just appreciating this like holistic way that you come into the work that you offer us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say that I was feeling reminded of as you were sharing this bit of wisdom is that, often our impact can become the thing that we do that is like currency, that also we can be in exchange of value and we can receive money for those things. But sometimes we make an impact and it's also can be a tremendous amount of work and not just a hobby. And I think that we don't do enough, especially related to women and mothers, to acknowledge how deeply meaningful that work can be. I get into arguments sometimes with people about like, oh, that's, quote, just a hobby.
Yeah.
And I feel like it really diminishes the power of what a lot of us are bringing to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing could have just been called a hobby for me. But even when I was blogging, when my first son was born, I took that so seriously. And I would go to this coffee shop where my husband worked and I'd bring him in his car seat while he slept. And like, I would journal and read and write. And I took it so seriously. And it was so life-giving for me. Even if only, 8 people read it, it still led me to being who I am today. It still was, sort of a portal to that part of myself that I really, really needed to get to in order to get to a place where I could help others. And share my words with them. So I totally agree with you. And I think we definitely do that sometimes, especially with creative things. We just label them as hobbies, and kind of downplay what they can do in the world.
That's interesting. I hadn't made the connection about how often it is things that are creative that we tend to put into that box. Well, I want to move to the next guidepost, I, which stands for invested in yourself. And I'd love to hear what you have learned about how to care for our whole selves. And I'm also wondering if you could weave a little bit about your understanding of embodiment into this guidepost, because it's another thing that I feel like I've been on a quest for. And it's a really challenging thing to like fully grasp and actually like step into.
Yeah. I think the journey of embodiment and caring for myself is, and for so many of us, it just is absolutely a lifelong journey. And it's funny when you're talking about the spiral. I mean, I keep coming back to the same things in myself, but also recognizing how much I've grown and learned to understand. I was recently diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which many women have. It's also an underdiagnosed hormonal chronic illness. And even in just finally getting a diagnosis for that, sort of helped me unravel and peel back more layers of who I am and how I care for myself. And I am someone who lives so well in my head, but that means, even from trauma when I was younger, I have had so much like chronic pain and anxiety and dissociation in so many ways, so my healing journey, so much of it has been about getting out of my head and into my body, whether that's like learning to meditate a little or journaling or other spiritual practices, or my most sort of recent journey with that is rock climbing over the last few years with my family. When there are days when I have like a headache, I've been thinking too hard, I've been at my computer for too long, and I will go to the gym, or I'll go do like a Peloton ride, or I'll go do something that's in my body and out of my thinking mind, and the headache goes away, or my body, relaxes again. I realize I'm not breathing deeply. And so that's what's causing the headache. And so I come back to my body. And that has just been such a learning curve again and again and again. I mean, it's so multi-layered because our health is connected to our stress, and our stress is connected to our personal stories and how we view ourselves, and are we worthy of care? Yeah. And it's so hard. And I just read this beautiful, I think it's an Irish phrase. It says, "You are the place I stand when my feet are sore. You are the place I stand when my feet are sore." And it's about, you say it to someone who takes care of you, but I was thinking about, what if we said that to ourselves? That I look at myself in the mirror and I say, "You are the place I stand when my feet are sore." That we actually have the capacity to deeply care for ourselves, for every version of ourselves, and to hold that. But it requires a lot. It requires maybe having a partner who supports that for you. I have that, It requires time. For some people, it requires having money to go to therapy. For the first 2 years of therapy, for me, a Twitter follower paid for my therapy. I mean, there's just things that people have shown up, to care for me. And we have to have some of that available to us. So it also happens in community. And we need that. We need to be having the conversations so that we can show up for ourselves and check in with each other, showing up for themselves. I want my friends to be able to have that capacity. So how can I help them show up for themselves too and have that space? And it involves just a lot of, again, presence and conversations. And for me, it involves a lot of journaling. I journal a lot.
That is so beautiful. And it's reminding me of a letter I wrote to myself on my 50th birthday. It's called Dear Body. And actually, I think it kind of blew my mind. I had one of those moments, when you look out at the stars and you try to actually grasp the fact that it never ends. I had this moment about my body where I realized, oh my God, I've literally been with you my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be with you my entire life. What are you telling me? And how do I treat you? And what are the moments throughout my life when I have felt the most powerful in my own body? And how have I cared for myself the most? And I just wrote this commitment letter. And the metaphor between our own body and then also this earth that we are a part of was feeling really clear to me as I was listening to your episode on We Can Do Hard Things, about how, like, in the ways that we sometimes take for granted our own bodies and our interconnectedness to it, I think the same happens with our relationship to nature and to earth. I'm curious what comes up when you hear all of that.
Well, for women, for Indigenous people, that disconnect from the earth is a very real and political and active thing. That colonization has, its role in the world has been to sort of separate people from land. And that happens to all of us, but it's often been targeted toward women. Like, you can think of the witch hunts and the burning times in Europe. So much of it was women who were connected to the land or who had some sort of power in society, and that wasn't wanted, that wasn't accepted. And for Indigenous people in so many parts of the world, it was this connection to the land and this really beautiful way of being that wasn't wanted. And there's literally so much healing for all of us, so much healing in us, becoming childlike and curious again with our relationship to the land and our literal bodies. Whether you just go lay in your yard and just lay down for 20 minutes and feel some sort of connection to the dirt beneath you, or you do a sport outside, or you just sit and look out the window once a day, every day, for 10 minutes. There are so many things. I encourage people to write love letters to Mother Earth as a being, as who she is, because I think even that, if we can even rewire our brains to understand that there's a relationship there, I think it is holistic. It's all connected. That if we rewire that relationship, we're going to notice that our healing is connected to her healing. Our relationship healing is connected to healing our relationship to the earth. Like, it's all has these ripple effects. And again, is maybe a giant spiral, it's all interwoven together and we can't ignore it. It's all there.
Well, that is a perfect segue to the last guidepost C, which stands for connected. Connected to community. I often say it so that we remember that we do not have to be on this journey alone. What are the biggest words of wisdom that you have been uncovering and continuing to discover about connecting?
I've lived a fairly nomadic life, meaning that we've moved a lot. I moved a lot when I was younger and then lived in one place for 10 years. And then when my husband and I got married, we've moved a lot for grad school and different things. And we would move houses or homes every 2 years. We didn't necessarily mean to, but we would. So we'd end up in a different neighborhood. Maybe the kids were in a different school district, and so it just happened. And so it's been interesting for me to finally pause and realize that that's an interesting thing because we are also deeply communal people. And so things that have happened, in the places we've lived, we might get to know the servers and the managers at a local restaurant. We lived in Atlanta and we became really good friends with this one burger place, and we would go there once a week and go see everyone. And my kids would have their birthdays there, and then they'd come to our house for birthdays. And, it just was this beautiful portal to community. And now it's at our climbing gym, people talk about third places, what's that place that's cheers, where everybody knows your name? What's the place where you go, where you feel totally at home, where you feel like you can be yourself? And for me, that place is our climbing gym. And that's really special for us to show up to a place where, our kids, my oldest goes to a Dungeons and Dragons class there and also climb there, and they're on the team, and I see other women there. I feel supported as a woman, as a mom, to be able to climb. And they've supported my book launches. We've done book launches there, and they've sold my children's books. And it's just such a gift to show up somewhere and build it. But it takes time, it takes time to build community. And I think that we've had to learn how to be patient and create that. And also a gift of the world we live in today is that some of my closest friends, I've maybe only met in person a few times because we met on social media or we met through some writing event, but we don't live in the same city. So the way that we connect with each other is through Zoom or through texting and calling, And so that's such a gift because that's where the community of writers that I have has come in, is through those people. And I know that they are just a text message away, that I can check in with them and I can tell them I'm thinking of them, or, if they're working on a book or working on something and they need support, I can be there for them from far away. And that's a real gift of the time period we live in, is that many of us have a flexibility in community like that, and virtual community. And that's real too. It's not fake community. It's not the same as being able to hold, and hug each other and share meals together, but it is still incredibly important and special. And so I have sort of a hybrid, of that. And I'm really grateful for that.
It's funny, I keep thinking about these lessons I learned from the youth development and community development work I did at this organization for 15 plus years. And as you're talking, I was thinking about one of the key principles that we used to talk about a lot, which is there's so much power in being known and knowing others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes a presence and intentionality that I'm hearing you share. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be about physical proximity. But I love the way that your family has consciously done that in even like the restaurants that you go to. But the acknowledgement that sometimes those connections happen in new ways that were never possible in the past. I'm appreciating all of that. Well, we're getting close to the end. I wanted to ask you one other question before I invite you to give me and anyone listening a challenge. I often talk about something that I call an epic snapshot moment. And these are the moments that are those times that you feel like you would love to bottle it up, where you actually have the realization as it's happening that, oh my goodness, this is everything that I've been striving for. This is everything I love. And I'm wondering, if you think about your epic life, if there's a recent epic snapshot moment that weaves together all the things that matter to you.
Oh my goodness. There's a place we love to go climbing at a spot in West Virginia, and it's really sweet because there's an outdoor store there that will do events for my children's books. And so it's this beautiful combination of going to this town that we love. It's 6.5 hours away from where we live in Philadelphia. So, going on a road trip with my family and getting to where we're staying, and then, being supported by this outdoor store. And we've started, making friends in this town. And it's just such a gift to get to know the people in this climbing town and getting to go outside and climb. And it's funny because we actually see people from our climbing gym here because they also travel there a lot. We're going outside in a totally different place to climb, but we're seeing people from home. And then there's this wonderful outdoors community in this store that will host events for me, which is so sweet. And we're getting to know these friends and then just feeling so connected and doing all of it with my family, because they don't often get to travel with me for my speaking events and stuff like that. So it's so much fun. And we always want to go back to this place. Anytime we're we have a little window of travel, what we like to do, we so often just want to go back here because it gives us a bit of everything. It completely challenges me to be embodied when I'm hiking and climbing, to trust myself and to grow. And then I feel supported in my writing, whether I am just there writing or we're actually doing something fun with local community. And it's just such a wonderful thing to have a place like that. And it can be so simple, it's just a spring break trip to go to a place where we love to climb, but it's also so much more than that. And sometimes the very simplest things are the ones that it's so simple, but it's so much more than that. It's just a garden, but it's so much more than that. Or it's just a school pageant, but it's so much more than that. And I think that those moments or places or spaces are really special because they remind us that there is just such sacred, beautiful energy in some places or in some people for us that we need in our lives. And that is a place where that shows up for me.
I love that story. And it makes me think about the power in places and spaces where all of the parts of who we are can come together.
Mhm.
Like one of the things I was hearing you say is like sometimes they host events for you so that your impact gets to show up, but also among your family. And it's also a place that you're caring for your body. And it's just all of these things that matter to you are coming together in one place.
Yeah, I love it.
We're now at the moment where you get to invite all of us to say yes to some invitation or challenge. So I know that we've covered so many things and you've already sprinkled some powerful things that we could say yes to throughout the conversation. But if you were to kind of take a bird's eye view of all the epic guideposts and all the things we've been talking about, what's one thing that you think is integral to all of these things that you might invite us to say yes to?
It's a kind of a mindset and a practice that I think is really important. And it has to do with just thinking in a more cyclical way instead of a linear one. And this could show up in a lot of different ways, but I'll just share 2 ways that this shows up for me in hopes that it's helpful for people. So the first one is to sort of do this practice where you take a piece of paper and you draw like 5 circles on it, big enough that you can write inside of them. And these circles represent like different circles of your life. So maybe one is like, work tasks, or maybe one is family, one is work, one is hobbies, maybe one is other passions or something like that, where you're getting to step back and like look at your life in a different way. It kind of arranges our brain differently to see them within these circles instead of like a timeline or something more linear. And when you're drawing it on a piece of paper, it's not out of body, but you're looking down on your life basically, And so you can use these circles for so many different things, like different roles that you might play. So like maybe one circle is mother and one is writer and one is movie producer or, whatever, climber. So like whatever these different quote unquote roles that you carry in life, write them down so you can just see the vastness of who you are. I think that that's a really special practice to do, and to do it regularly, not just once, to see how it's shifting, because who we are right now may be a little different next year. Our roles might change. And then another practice that I often do is every season. So as the seasons are changing with Mother Earth, that I sort of ask how I need to evaluate and what might need to change in my life. So whether it's like my daily routine or how am I eating, or it's kind of like New Year's resolutions, but every season. So and you're not having to do it for an entire year. You're just doing it for the next like 3 to 4 months, like we don't have to expect so much of ourselves like that, where you make these decisions and they're supposed to last for a whole calendar year. It's a lot more tender, I think, to us if we say, I'm going to try this out for the next few months. And if it's a pattern I love, if it's something I start that I want to finish, then I'll go into the next season with it. But if it's not, I'll let it go. So every season I sort of look at like the rhythm of my days, and for my chronic illness, like what do I need to be doing to take care of myself that matches the season I'm in? And how can I, reevaluate that? Or how is my spirit doing? Are there spiritual practices I need to change or shift? And how is my family and how am I connecting with them? So it's just a beautiful way of, again, living in a more cyclical way, because we're always going to come back and revisit autumn, and spring is always going to come around again. And so we get to sort of revisit ourselves more than once throughout the year and revisit our life. So both of those practices, drawing the circles and just living seasonally, are really practical and tangible. And they're just really gentle. And I think that we just need more of that, like space to just look at our life, look at where we're at without judgment, and just be tender, but also challenge ourselves and show up to the moment we're in and ask who we get to be in the coming season. And I think that that's something we all need maybe a little bit more of right now.
Those are beautiful invitations. Thank you so much for them. I have one last request before we close, if you are open to it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you would close us out with your definition of what it means to live resistance. And if you'd be open to reading for us the resistance commitment that is so beautiful at the end of the book.
Yeah. I share at the beginning of the book, my like definition of resistance is we use our lives to exert energy against the dangerous status quo of our time. And that energy can show up in so many different ways. It can show up in very personal, quiet ways. It can show up in very communal ways. It can show up in organizations and in society. So it's kind of that dance between what we call the micro and the macro, that resistance can show up in so many different ways. And that's the beauty of it, So this resistance commitment at the end of Living Resistance, I wrote, it's like covering all the ways. It's from the very simple things to the big things, and all of it is resistance. So I'll read it. How do we resist? We resist by breathing, by gardening, by telling the truth, by reading banned books, by singing love songs, by grieving, by trying again, by not giving up on ourselves, by challenging what we think we know, by knowing that love is always there, by trusting future generations, by drawing pictures, by fighting ableism, by petting dogs, by telling your body they matter, by sending flowers to a tired friend, by reaching out when you might need flowers, by dreaming of an anti-racist world, by meditating when things get hard, by being patient with yourself, by setting healthy boundaries, by believing in solidarity, by refusing to other your kin, by writing in that journal, by saying hello to Mother Earth every day, by listening to music, by writing music, by deconstructing what you once knew, by asking what it all means, by admitting we know nothing, by honoring humility, by honoring the children, by becoming like children, by dancing in a snowstorm, by holding someone's hand, by holding your own hand, by breathing deep again, by saying yes to all the magic that is, by saying no to the status quo of harm, by honoring whatever realm you are in, by honoring all the spaces in between, by honoring this moment, this time, this embodiment. This is living resistance.
Kaitlin, thank you for the beauty and depth and simplicity and power, your strength and your fierceness in everything that you share. I'm so grateful for the one book that I read, but I'm excited to discover the others and the ones that are coming for this time. I'm leaving with a reminder about the larger whole. I carried with me this idea about the spiral, but I'm now thinking about the larger spiral and the way that everything is connected. And I'm committed to bringing more presence and more gratitude to myself and to my children, the impact I'm here to make, the community that I build, and the important work that I do that's so meaningful to me, which is really about reflection and dialogue and helping people to make meaning of their lives. So thank you for all of those gifts. Is there anything in particular you feel like you're leaving with from this conversation today?
Yeah, I think just a reminder of that importance of the gentleness that we carry. And I love that you brought up the spiral too. That's a really special sort of symbol for me. But we forget. We have so many things that pop up that are important, and then sometimes we forget them. So it's nice when we're reminded, like, this symbol or this idea is actually really important, and means something. And so I'm taking that with me, and just a reminder of my own journey and how it is connected to so many others, and just the gentleness and the fierceness that we get to embody along the way, and that we're not alone, in doing it. And that means a lot.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.